I know you and I wanted to discuss a little bit about herbal remedies for stress and mood. So yeah, let's get that going. What do you have any suggestions for that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a
Yeah,
good segue too, because I mentioned
yeah,
lemon balm.
yeah.
And lemon balm and skullcap were probably my first two main nervines that I worked with. So when I think about nervines, I think about categories, right? Because I like to think about practicing flexible herbalism. So it's a little different than when I started, right? When I was like, you have to only use what you can access. Now I more think, okay, let's think about these categories and then herbs that kind of fit in those categories. And then you have a menu of options that you can pick from depending on what you have access to at any given time. And then you can draw from things in those categories especially to formulate, because I
Hmm.
usually use herbs in formula, except if I'm, say, treating something very specific, working with a kid, working with somebody who has, say, narrowtherapeutic drugs, and I want to avoid certain things. Or I'm studying a plant and just want to use that to really see how it affects me. Or I'm making recommendations to an herb student who's just a beginner, because I think it's a great place to start with feeling each plant and playing around with it separately. So when I think about herbs for stress and mood, I mostly think about herbs that are in both nervine and adaptogenic categories. And in terms of the nervine categories, I'm really thinking about, okay, is it more sedating, or is it more nourishing, or is it just frankly soporific, like hops or valerian, versus the more like calming, soothing nervines would be things like lemon balm, skullcap, catnip, things like that. And then in terms of the more nourishing, soothing ones, lemon balm can kind of go in that because it's very gentle. But I'm more thinking things like gotu kola, bacopa, milky oats, where you also have this like nourishment to the nerves themselves. And depending on kind of how you categorize things, maybe St. John's wort would go in there too, somewhat, supplementing. And we know pharmacologically it has very specific actions there. And then I also think that when you're dealing with a lot of low mood, for example, comes from being fried, wired, and tired. And so using some adaptogenic herbs, not to override, because I think there's a lot of promotion, especially being here in the Bay Area where there's biohackers and every high performance executives who
Yeah.
they're just trying to optimize every second using nootropics and using all these substances to just try to make more money and invent more stuff and be the smartest and the most successful. You can do that, but how does that actually address the imbalance? That's just using herbs as little drugs to try to overcompensate for maybe an unsustainable lifestyle.
Mm.
But if but it is true. Like if your mood is down or you're really stressed out, the adaptogenic herbs, especially those that are a little less stimulating, I really love ashwagandha, which has gotten crazy popular, but it doesn't matter. I still love it,
Mm.
in part because I can grow it and have a connection with it from that. I also, for the right time and place, I find rhodiola very, very supportive, but a little more stimulating and also pretty drying. So I have to use it very selectively. And I would say somewhere in the middle between all those, holy basil, which is another one that I love to grow. And actually, I spend more time just out in the garden sniffing it and hanging out with it and having the bees buzz around. And maybe it's because I always just sort of forget to get around to garbling the stuff that I grow myself. I end up growing a lot less, like consuming a lot less tea than just enjoying having it all over my property in the summertime.
You used a term, I thought I heard you say soporific, and I don't know that
Oh, yeah.
term.
Yeah, soporific would be things that really make you feel like if you drink a really hoppy beer and you're like, oh boy, I'm so done. So soporific meaning something that's like highly sedating and gonna just put you to sleep. So hops, valerian. Some people put passion flower in there. I think that's a depends on the person. Some people respond really strongly to it, others don't. A category I didn't talk about, also say under nervines is in part because I'm just talking off the top of my head and not off
Sure.
notes, is thinking about herbs that help with calm anxiety. And of course, in the product world with Deshay, we have to be really careful about what we can and can't say. But when I'm just talking about herbs and categories, I think anxiolytics is an herbal action type that herbalists talk about. And some of my favorite anxiolytics, again, skullcap really hits there big time. Kava kava is a huge favorite that I rely on a lot. California poppy
Uh,
is both anodyne and so phenomenal as a single for coping with anxious overwhelm kind of feeling.
do you have any opinions or teachings on blue vervain? Because that's always of interest to me. Like the way people described skullcap and how it affects them, I kind of feel like that's kind of blue vervain for me. And I don't know if there's anything going on there, but yeah, if you have anything to say about blue vervain, I'm very curious.
Totally. You know, it's really interesting. Blue vervain is one of Ben's favorite herbs.
Really?
And it's one of the ones, yeah. And it's one of those that it's so bitter that I think I avoid consuming too much of it. It's kind of like mugwort. I mean, not mugwort. It's more like as bitter as motherwort and say horehound almost. It's really on that end where I kind of like the sweet bitterness of skullcap better. But I think blue vervain or skullcap are just, they're really good buddies too. I think that biochemically, and I need to go verify this, but I'm pretty sure it has some GABAergic activity similar to kava, where it's not kava, like skullcap. It's not a lock and a key. It's not like a GABA agonist where it actually fits into the GABA receptor per se, but it modulates and thus can kind of tamp down the stress response. So yeah, blue vervain is great. There's a amazing blue vervain that I think it's Verbena hastata that grows in the coastal ranges in the central coast of California in a place that a huge crew of us used to go camping every single spring. Grows all along the roadsides and like right now, this time of year, it's just ecstatic. And we made some really fun formulas where we harvested blue vervain, California poppy, and some wild California valerian from the same areas and made really amazing, just like super chill formulas. Maybe some oats in there. Maybe some oats in there too to kind of like sweeten it up a little bit and nourish it out.
Can't go wrong with oats. That's probably my most consumed herb. People HerbRally podcasts have heard me talk about oats and oat straw ad nauseum at this point. But yeah, I'm curious. Maybe I don't do so well with skullcap because is there a difference between fresh skullcap and dried skullcap that you're aware of? Is that a thing?
Biochemically, no, but I think flavor wise, really differently. I think people respond to skullcap very uniquely. I remember being one of these these memorable moments when you're a early herbalist and you give something to somebody that really works and you never forget that moment. I was in New Orleans in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina, and we joined with a community organization that started a first aid clinic in the city there, and a woman who had been doing dog rescue because all these dogs were abandoned and there were dogs locked up, and it was really traumatic, not just for the humans but for all the animals left in the city. And she hadn't slept for 3 days and she'd been bitten, and she came in to get her bite kind of cleaned up, and she was palpitating, just super high anxiety. And I remember putting 15 drops of skullcap tincture into a 12-ounce plastic water bottle because we were all drinking bottled water. And, I'm the kind of person, I dose really heavy with herbs. I just, couple dropperfuls many times. Just, you need to hit me with like a ton of bricks for something to knock me out.
Yeah.
She came back 2 days later and she said, whatever you gave me, that was super strong. She said, I just slept for 36 hours. And I think it wasn't because it's such a strong soporific plant. I think it's because she was so wired and so tired that just this teeny hint to her body of like, hey, chill out, you need to rest. And then she just needed all that sleep. But it really hit me. And ever since then, when I'm working with skullcap, I usually have people start with it as a single. And then I recommend try 5 drops, try 10 drops, and just wait and sit with it because that might be enough for you. And if you're like me and you need to take 2 squirts, that's fine too. But it's definitely unique. Whereas I think other herbs are a little less dose sensitive across different individuals.
It's very interesting because with a blue vervain, I do feel like I just need almost like this tiny amount to kind of feel the effects. But say I've been taking St. John's wort regularly now for the past month or so, and am I noticing it? I I don't actually know. And I was told, give it 3 months, which I'm fine with. I've been pretty good about taking it a few times a day. But yeah, I don't feel any sort of energetic difference. But just the mere mention, you said ashwagandha earlier, and I was like, I don't know. There was like this sigh of relief internally when you said that word, and yeah, I have like these associations with the plant. So maybe there's partially like that automatic response or placebo or something like that going on there. But
definitely. Yeah, set and setting is important as we take these, and that's why I for example don't really practice flower essences or some of the things that I find that maybe are a little more esoteric, but there is really something to giving something, any kind of medicinal anything to somebody and saying like, this is what it's going to do for you, and setting that is part of the rapport and the clinical practice. And I, as a physician who prescribes, for better or for worse, a lot of pharmaceuticals, I spend a lot of time talking to my patients about what they might expect, potential side effects, the benefits they're expecting to see. And most of my patients say, wow, no doctor has ever bothered to tell me the pros and cons of a drug that they're going to prescribe me. They just write it and say, take this. And so, well, I can't, one, I have to, that's my obligation. And two, I'm kind of used to that from herbal medicine. Yeah. And the other thing is like most of the herbs that I give people, I've used in my body and I have a personal relationship and familiar with how they feel. But the vast majority of drugs that I prescribe, except for like ibuprofen, I've never taken. So I don't know how they feel in my body. So it's so different to practice these such different modalities, but a lot of the same skill sets still apply in terms of building rapport, building trust, setting up somebody to kind of expect what they might feel, and then also say, and if it doesn't work, or you don't feel anything, or you have this bad thing that happens, like, hey, let me know. We can change things up.